David Podmore, good morning.
Good morning, Bill.
Did we leave anything out?
Wow, I'm a little embarrassed by that.
What was your first job?
My first real job, if you like, after I graduated with my master's from the University of Alberta was I went to work for the engineering department of the city of Edmonton as a transportation planner. And that led me through a number of positions in the city of Edmonton until I left Edmonton in 1980 to come to work on Expo 86.
Expo 86. What was that experience like?
It was a fabulous experience. I was the second employee of what was called BC Place Corporation, which had the responsibility to assemble the site, 225 acres, move the tenants and that on the site off, and service and prepare the site basically for Expo 86.
Huge job.
And to build the stadium. And for a young person like me that had, had about 6 to 7 years work experience, it was a fabulous opportunity. I mean, I always remember the phone call from Alvin Nayrod, who I didn't really know. He phoned me out of the blue. He says, "I've heard about you. I want you to come to Vancouver, and I want you to join me in development of BC Place in preparation for Expo 86. And the most interesting thing was I met Alvin at his house. We got along really, really well. And he turned to me, and it was a Friday night, and he says, "I want you to phone your wife and get your wife to come down to Vancouver. I want you to buy a home and be here in 2 weeks." And
wow.
We did. My wife came down. We bought a home in Richmond, and we went back to Edmonton, and I asked the lawyer that I knew well just a few things about selling our house. He says, "Don't worry about it. I'll buy your house." And he bought our house. So it was sort of meant to be. Yeah.
Yeah. Our mutual friend Jess Ketchum reminded me yesterday that you had done much of this, and I thought it was interesting because most recently we have been in contact over the reopening of the new BC Place with the controversial roof, but the spectacular redevelopment of the whole stadium. And it was Jess who reminded me that you were actually there building the original.
That's right. Yeah. And, and one of the things I'm quite proud of, I really was the only senior executive of BC Place or Expo 86 that was there from the start to the finish. I started, as I say, the second employee of BC Place after Alvin, and finished up in October of 1986.
But when we look back at Expo, what would you say the main legacy of Expo has been?
I think the biggest legacy was it raised the profile of Vancouver internationally, and I think it raised further the confidence of the city of Vancouver and its citizens and the citizens of the province in terms of what we could do and what we could be.
And it certainly showed the world what we had and enticed a good part of the world to come here.
And the timing was perfect in terms of events that started to unfold, in the late 80s and the 90s. It meant a great deal to this community.
I said you were there when they reopened BC Place, too, because we talked that day. Since then, there has been a major controversy over the naming rights, and you were right in the middle of that. We're not going to dwell on it this morning because that's not the purpose of the interview, but I couldn't not ask you about it. You were very disappointed when the deal blew up.
I was very disappointed, and I am disappointed. We did negotiate I think a good transaction with TELUS, but it always was understood that it was at the discretion of government as to whether or not we would proceed, and under provincial policies, the provincial government always has the last say in terms of the naming of a public facility. So.
Do you find yourself saying, "Why am I doing this? Why am I putting up with this for?" I mean, they say $1 a year. You're doing a huge job on a voluntary basis.
It has been a big job. I mean, I took it on initially in April of 2007 when Premier Campbell asked me if I would assist in getting the completion of the Vancouver Convention Centre expansion on track in time for its use as the broadcast facility and to get the budget under control. And I didn't know at the time that then I'd be asked to make some recommendations about the future of BC Place. But it has been a fascinating exercise. I'd be deceitful if I didn't say it's been very tiring. It's been very stressful at times. But I'm very proud of the accomplishments on both of them. And so it's been, I think, a real privilege to have been involved.
Have you decided how long you'll remain as chair?
I haven't, Bill. There's a couple of things that I'd like to make sure are finished. An obvious thing, we want to finish up the accounts for construction. We've done very well on that front. But but I want to make sure that's all completed. There are a few outstanding warranty things that need to be done, and normal in the course of a project this size. So I want to make sure those are all looked after, which they will be.
The roof continues to have some problems.
They're very minor. They're overblown, quite frankly. Yep. They're not unusual to a project of this scope, and they're all resolvable. We need some good weather is what we need right now. Yeah.
Well, we're due. Back to you. Do you have a mentor? Have you had mentors over the years in your early years?
I've had, several mentors. I would say, I certainly considered my father a mentor. My father was a very kind man. He set a very good example in terms of how he respected and treated other people. Jimmy was to a certain extent a mentor. He may be surprised to hear me say that, but I had the good fortune of spending a few years working with Jimmy when he took over responsibilities of chair of Expo 86 and BC Place.
He also did it for $1 a year.
He did, yeah. I hope he got paid because I've only got 2 of the 5 that I'm entitled to. But and I think he did it for the same reasons. Jack Poole, of course, really I think would be the key mentor for me. We had a fabulous relationship, and it was one of the most fortunate things in my life when Jack and I got together in 1986, early 1987. And so
that was the beginning of concert.
The concert actually was formed on June 1st, 1989, but Jack and I worked together on a number of projects from 87 through to 89.
How do you handle your schedule? How do you deal with time management? Because when you look at, if you listen to that intro and you hear the things that you do, I mean, how do you find, I've got a picture of you here holding a fish at a lake. So unlike Jimmy, you take the odd day off.
I do, and I have a lot of interests. I probably have too many interests, quite frankly, and don't get the time to pursue them all. Oh, I like to fish. I'm an avid skier. I've been skiing ever since I was 10 years old. I like woodwork. I like metalwork. I like traveling. I like boating. I have a boat, and I enjoy boating and fishing. I like reading. So I have very diverse interests, but I think my greatest passions are obviously spend time with my family, and if I can combine that with skiing or fishing or travel, then it's perfect.
And you manage to do all of that?
I do. We haven't, in the last few years, particularly with what I've had on my plate, we haven't had as much time as maybe we would have had earlier in my life. But that'll change.
David Podmore in our series on chief executives, and we will talk more with Mr. Podmore right after this. Talking with David Podmore, CEO of Concert Properties. He is also chair of the BC Pavilion Corporation. Where do you see BC's economy going over the next 3 years?
It's a difficult time to forecast. I mean, I'm very bullish about where British Columbia will go, that we'll see sustained growth. But there are so many important decisions to be made in this province in the next few years that will have quite an impact on our growth.
What sorts of things?
Well, there's a lot of decisions related to resource extraction and transportation, the pipeline discussions, the various mining proposals that are under consideration, some of the tourism and resort projects that are being contemplated in the province. We have, of course, a provincial election coming. So I think in this next 12, 14 months, that some of the decisions that are in front of our decision makers, it's going to be very important.
When it's decided to do something like build the Evergreen Line, that impacts everything that you and people in your business does, correct?
It does. I think it's also very important for the community. I totally support the decisions that have been made to expand our rapid transit system. I think, frankly, if anything, we should be doing more because these are investments for the very long term. And, they create a lot of employment during construction. They create great opportunities to house people ultimately and improve convenience of access. But these are decisions that astute politicians are making to serve our community 10, 15, and 20 years out.
You remember all the controversy around the Canada Line?
I do. And then look at the success. And the only thing I think that's unfortunate with the Canada Line, frankly, is that I think the zoning should have been in place well in advance of the construction of the line so that we'd start to have seen, some development around the key station nodes and that at an earlier date.
That's the whole point of having a transit line, is it not? To create sensible density where people can get in and out of town and, efficiently?
Absolutely, and it makes perfect sense. I mean, I guess if if I was a premier, I'd be very seriously, maybe they are, but I would be seriously looking at bringing transit out Highway number 1 in the median early, and creating those nodes out in the valley so you don't spread out onto the agricultural land, but create denser nodes very conveniently located.
And yet, as soon as we want to do something, or the government wants to do something like that, the question becomes, well, how do we pay for it? And you've heard the squawking. People don't want to pay an extra 2 cents on their carbon tax. They don't want to pay an extra $20 on their property tax. They say they're taxed to the limit. They can't afford any more. And yet we do need this expansion of transportation.
Well, it's quite a complicated subject, but one of the things that I think has to change, and there are a lot of people in the development industry pushing for the change, is that municipalities are taking a large portion of the uplift, if you like, when lands are rezoned around these transit stations. And I think a better approach is to demand that facilities be built that it support the development of rapid transit stations, for example, where developers, through rezoning, would make a contribution and directly build some of that infrastructure. But if municipalities continue to increase the amount that they extract, that they take out in terms of the improvement in value, it's going to be difficult to fund it.
So you're bullish on Metro Vancouver and British Columbia?
Yeah, and the people in my office they cringe every time I say it, because I'm trying to encourage us to look further afield. One of the areas I firmly believe is that you're going to see continued, sustained, and significant growth in the north. And I think that's one of the real futures. I've always been interested in the north, northern Alberta, northern British Columbia, even into the territories. But that corridor, from Prince George to Prince Rupert and to the northeast towards Fort St. John, and up towards Smithers with the mining activity and that, you're going to see really significant growth in this province.
So what skills should we be developing? If you had a youngster in grade 8 or 9, what would you be encouraging them to look to do?
Well, I'm not going to answer it in the sense of occupation. I think one of the most important skills for a young person, prospective leader in the future, is communication skills. I think that if I had advice for a young person, is to really hone your communication skills, verbal communication skills and written communication skills. Even though we're in this electronic age, those are still really, really critical skills, and they'll serve you well if you want to aspire to a position of senior leadership.
I'm smiling because I see so many young people today texting, and I text, and I'm on Twitter and all that, but I'd still rather talk to somebody. I've seen people send emails to people across the floor. I've seen people, texting. I've seen two people sitting together texting.
Yeah.
When they're supposed to be talking to each other or having lunch. And I do worry that, and I've talked to parents who worry that their kids are not getting the kind of communication skills or developing the one-on-one personal communication skills that they're going to need.
Well, I really believe to get into a position of senior leadership and to be effective as a senior leader, you have to have very well-developed communication skills, verbal especially, verbal presentation skills and verbal communication skills. And I don't think that's going to change with the electronic age. That's still going to be very significant. The other one, and Jack was a tremendous mentor on this.
Jack
Poole was the ability to simplify. As this world gets more and more complex and we have all of these devices and communication skills and resources at hand, there is a tendency by a lot of people to make things overly complicated. And one of the things that I think is a real attribute of a very senior, competent leader is the ability to simplify. So you can explain things in a simple manner, you can cut through a lot of the rhetoric and simplify basically any given problem.